Good morning. We're in the middle of a Sichah printed in Likkutei Ches. We're holding, this is the fifth Sichah in the Chelik over there, part of Project with the Sichos. We're holding Ois Hey. But when das verstehen behekt the Makasha Klal is in dem Ingen von Karbonos and Nesim, we'll understand all of this entire Rashi that we explained yesterday. What's the idea of all these items that correspond to different Adam Rishon, Noach, etc. So we'll understand all of this by first prefacing the general concept of Karbonos and Nesim. Die Karbonos and Nesim zijn given niet aan de dove van Mishkan Bechlal bij de Agalos Schuli. So the Karbonos that the princes, the Nesim, brought to the Mishkan was not like just a gift on the dove, like they gave Agalos wagons, nor the Chanukas HaMizbech. These Karbonos that the Nesim brought were specifically for the inauguration of the Mizbech. Was der Chinuch HaMizbech hat sich aufgetan dafke durch die Sachen, was mit Makar given öfen HaMizbech. That dafke, when the Yidden brought these Karbonos on the Mizbech, then you can have the Chinuch HaMizbech. The Selis Blula Bashemen LaMincha Tedes and Oilach Chatos Ushlamim. That the Mizbeach was inaugurated by the Karbonos brought by the Mizbeach, the fine flour mixed with olive oil for mincha, incense, and oila, chatos, and shlamim, etc. So the Rebbe says, the Fizeh, and to move on, based on this, if the whole Chanukas HaMizbeach was dafka through these Karbonos, so the Rebbe asks, the Fizeh, and to move on, based on this, it's not understood. Was der Pasuk hebt on zum allem ersten nicht mit dem Sug Hanal, was wird nikra auf Mizbeach. The Torah does not start with the Torah does not list first the categories of Karbonos which were offered on the Mizbeach, but what does he say? Nor mit Karbonei karas kesav achas mizrak echad ugemer. Und dazu noch mit an arichas apratim in the Mishkol, Shavif and Kalim, und azay eich danach beim kaf achas. Ki'ilu wie die Kalim sein gar der reish ikar Chanukas HaMizbeach. So the Rebbe asks a very simple question. Why does the Torah first list not the categories of the Karbonos which were offered on the Mizbeach, but first one silver bowl, one sprinkled basin, detailing the weight and the value each keli, and likewise later with the spoon, as if the kelim, the utensils, were actually the primary focus of the Chanukas HaMizbeach. Okay, so now the Rebbe says like this, in Vav. Good morning. Okay. Der Bier B'cholze, the explanation is as follows. It says, Mistaber Parshas, as the Nemazim for the Karbonos, the Chanukas HaMizbeach, Shebe Mishkan sein in dem Inyan HaMizbeach. The Hainu, in Zeh wird Aris gebracht der Uftu von dem Mizbeach und die Karbonos was mir bringt auf Das heißt, die Nesim bei Yikru as Karbonum, der Chanukas HaMizbeach, haben sie das ausgestellt in Aseder Miyuchad, am Misper Miyuchad, in welche es Merumes der Chiddush, was hat sich aufgetan damit, was ist da der Mizbeach, legabe der Friedike Matzah. So the Rebbe says that obviously this illusion of the Karbonos dafka for the inauguration of the Chanukas HaMizbeach are related dafka to the Mizbeach. In other words, this function that the Mizbeach and the Karbonos were for the inauguration of the Mizbeach, meaning that the Nesim brought their Karbonos to inaugurate the Mishkan, and they did so in this particular order, and they brought the specific amounts through which the Chiddush of the Mizbeach's function was alluded to, in contrast to the prior Karbonos. And the Rebbe says like this: the Ilu was es neschadish geworden in the Karbonos, was man bringt auf dem Mizbeach Shebe Mishkan, the Gabi Karbonos was man not makar gewinnt farman teira. Now, what was the novelty? What was like the distinction of the Karbonos offered on the Mizbeach in the Mishkan, in contrast to the Yidden brought Karbonos, or there was Karbonos brought even before the giving of the Torah. So, what exactly was accomplished by bringing a Karban on the Mizbeach after Matan Torah? So the Rebbe says a famous thing: the Uftu from Mishkan Bechlal is gemufurish bekrov also the Migdash v'shechante b'seichem. As Yidden machen auf an Ort, wo es ist da Hashras Hashchina begoli, Biz as the Mishkan Gufa is Amigdash. Ahede Kazach. So the function of the Mishkan in general, as the Torah says, they shall make me a Mishkan, and I will dwell in the midst, that the Yidden created a place where Hashem's presence is apparent, to the extent that the Mishkan itself becomes a Mishkan, a Mikdash, a sanctuary, which means a sanctified entity. And this is also the function of the Mishkan. This was the accomplishment of the Mizbeach Mishkan. As jeder Yid hat die Icheles zu nehmen, achuli in dike beheme v'chuli, avach in dike Zach, und machen davon a Korban Hashem in an Eufen, as mezet beini Basar, wie sie wird a hedike Zach. Durch dem, was mismakert dike beheme, Eufen Mizbeach und Eish ben Hashemayim, is Euchel dem Korban. So, what was the function of the Mishkan? What was the Chiddush? That every Yid could transform this ordinary animal. In other words, you take a non-holy object into a carbon for Hashem, and our physical eyes witness the animal becoming holy by being offered on the Mizbeach, and the fire from heaven consumes this offering. So the Rebbe says, if to Ares bringen Odem Uftu haben die Nesim gebracht zwei Suge Karbonis. Now, in order to highlight this unique function, the Nesim brought two categories of Karbonis, meaning Aleph. The erste Sug Karbonis is Nirmaz in the Kelim and Mincha Okteres was in Zee. Is Meramis if the Karbonis was Mahat Makrav Gwen Frier, Farmers Beach Shem Mishkan. Euch demelt is Gwen Hakravas a Karbonis. Es ist aber nicht Gwen dabei, euch nicht besume wie Geisme der Vartetze Eish mit auf Nashem Vategel. Was das beweist, Eva Shos Shchina. So the Rebbe says that the first category of karbonis, they are alluded dafka by the kelim. First of all, the utensils, the meal offerings, and the incense, which allude to the karbonis that were brought previously before there was a mishkan, a mizbeach in the mishkan. So these offerings were brought then too, but the process did not include, in other words, you didn't have this fire emanating from Hashem and consuming the karbonis, which would bring out Hashem's presence. Die Kelim allein und die Karbonis minchas Keteres welche gefinden sich in die Kelim, zet man nicht begolin kein Shine in sie. So, in terms of this remez, there's no apparent changes made to the Kelim themselves or to the Karbonis they contained, including dafke the meal offering and the incense. So that's the first type. The first type of Karbonis is alluded to in the Kelim and the Mincha the Keteres, that these were the Karbonis that we brought beforehand, and there were Karbonis brought, but you didn't see, it wasn't Nikar Begili, this Vatetze Eish, Melefnei Havaya Vatechel, that Hashem is consuming the Mizbeach, is consuming the carbon. Shenge, der zweite Sug Karbonis, Eile Chatas V'chuli, was ze allein, in ganzen oder der Iker Muf Choshe Behem, Chele V'dam, seine Karbonis, was Mizet Begoli, wie sie werden is Garven, standen durch Hallo, Zrikal Gav Mizbeach, Vatetze Eish, Melefnei Havaya Vatechel Kanal. On the other hand, the second category of Karbonis, which is the Eile Chatas, were themselves either entirely or their choicest parts, the fats and the blood, they were offered visibly and changed by being placed and sprinkled on the Mizbeach. You had this fire emanating from Hashem and consuming them as mentioned. Now, this is also alluded to in the different species in the two categories of the Karbonis. The Karbonis and the Kelim. Yeah, the Karbonis and the Kelim. The Karbonis in the Kelim, Mincha Keteres, zijn niet von min chai. So the vessels, the Mincha, the Keteres, they were not from the species of chai. Other in Zee is nicht nikar gewen chayus zera. Schenken the Karbonis von zweiten Zug zijn chai. Das ist mein Name, als durch den Mishkan Mizbeach ist es stradisch geworden, der Iloi von Gile, Ashos Hashchina, als von dem in Vechel machen min chai ukedushos. So the Rebbe says that the Karbonis in the utensils, which we said the meal offerings and the incense, does not come from the category of chai, animals. At any rate, their life force is not, you can't really see it. Now, the Karbonis of the second category, they were from the animals of chai, and this alludes to the fact that the Mishkan and the Mishkan and the Mizbeach introduced this chiddush that were able to have the revelation of Hashem's presence through taking an inanimate or mundane object, were transformed into something alive and chai. So basically, what the Rebbe is saying in short is that in sugim of karbonis you have two. You need a copy. In the sugim of karbonis you had two types. You had the first type of the mizbeach of the karbonis that were brought before Matan Torah. So they were karbonis, but it wasn't nikr. You didn't really see Hashem. There was no. It was like a person bringing a carbon, but there was no. It wasn't nikr that Hashem's presence is there. And then you have the karbonis after Matan Torah, which by bringing a carbon, you're taking something carbon which is chai, and through that you're bringing hashras hashchina, taking from the chayil, and you're making it kedusha. And that was the chiddush of the karbonis of after Matan Torah. So now the Rebbe says in Zayin, der uftu of us is da in Mishkan umizbeach lacher Matan Torah. So what was the accomplishment of the Mishkan and the Mizbeach after Matan Torah? In is Parshas angedeit geworden in dem Sagen als Matan Torah ist verbunden mit dem als Jiden wollen werden am Leches keinen Wege Kodesh. Over Mele wird sie geben werden euch als Sug Mitzvah zu sein Kevea Akadusha. In der Mitzvah Sachgufa, was euch Ben Chomish the Mikra versteht und sagt, als seien geworden heilig. So the Rebbe says that the unique function of the Mishkan and the Mizbeach after the giving of the Torah is expressed clearly in the pasuk. It says that the giving of the Torah was connected, like we had the Sichah last week, that the Yidden were becoming a Mamlechas Kainim, a kingdom of priests, and the Goy Kodesh, and a holy nation. So they were also commanded to observe mitzvahs that instill holiness in mitzvah objects themselves, and even a Ben Chomish Mikra, in other words, even a child understands and sees how these objects become holy. Und Alpha-Pias Beker hat sich das aufgetan bei Matan Torah, wenn Jiden seine geworden haben, Mamlechas Kainim v'Gei Kodesh, und seinen der Lieber. Nitztave geworden in alle Terag Mitzvahs, ist aber ein der Funschen gewesen, beim ersten Jid, Avram Avinu, was der Fall ist angesagt. Geworden in Mitzvahs Mila, Brisi B'Fsarchem, was is in dem Geder, wie Rashi bringt that up for, in Chefet Shom Mitzvah. Now this was primarily achieved by the giving of the Torah, when the Yidden became a kingdom of priests and holy nation, and therefore they were commanded to observe all the 630 mitzvahs. Nevertheless, we see a main of this existed by the first Yid, Avram Avinu. He was commanded to fulfill the mitzvah of Milah. As we know, it says about Milah, my covenant shall be in your flesh, which it's like Rashi says, it's a mitzvah, it's a mitzvah object. Rashi says it's a chayfet shel mitzvah. Und damit wird Musbar der Seder wie Rashi's Mefarish die Muslim von Karbonis an Nesiyim Yusud auf der Meisha Hadarshan aber Korre the Pshat und Yashav Shutta Shemikra was seinen voneinander geteilt in zwei Sugim. Now, this clarifies Rashi's order in interpreting the allusion to the Nesiyim based on the Meisha Hadarshan, but still close to Pshat, explaining the simple meaning of the pasuk. Now, Rashi breaks the Karbonis in two categories. Die Inyanim von Demim Teichter Ois als Remes, if Adam Radishim V'Tagdesav, Neach V'Tagdesav, und Shivim Umais, was in Zeh is nit Nikar B'Goli Chayis Hashas Hashchina. So first, Rashi interprets the Demim, the inanimate objects, as allusion to Adam and his descendants, Neach and his descendants, and the 70 nations, in which their Chayis, the vitality, in other words, the Hashem's presence, was not visible. You can't really see it. And then you have on the Inyanim von Chai Teichter Ois if Yidden Anhebnik von Avram bis Meishav Aaron Kenim Levim Yisraelim. And then Rashi explains the second type of Karbonis that Rashi interprets that these were Chai, an allusion to the Jewish people starting with Avram, Meishav Avram Kenim Levim Yisraelim. So the Rebbe explains this a little bit more barichas, but basically, Rashi, you have two types of karbonos. You have the karbonos that were brought before Matan Torah, and you have the karbonos that were brought after the Mizbeach. So the karbonos that were brought before Matan Torah, so it's not so nicker that the Hashras Hashchina is there. You're taking a daimim and the chayis over there. Mashenkin, after the Mishkan was constructed, or I should say after Matan Torah, So you're able to take, you're able to see the Ashras Shechina. Now, what was the accomplishment of Matan Torah? The Mamlechas Kenim, V'goy Kodesh. That we're able to actually take a physical thing and bring Kedush over there. So Rashi, in this Rashi that we explained, he's alluding to two different types of karbanos. You have the first types of karbanos, like Adam Rishon and before Matan Torah, that's one type, that Ashras Shechina is not so nicker. And then you have, after Matan Torah, the Ashras Shechina, which is more nicker. So that's where Rashi breaks it up into two. Now, the Rebbe says in Ches, es bleibt aber nicht verstandig. Now, it's still not understood. The Fizel hat doch sicher kein Ordnung zu abteichen Kav Achas Asar Zov Leiketeres von min Hadem Mitzimeach Eftera Asar Sadibus and Tiag Mitzvahs. Now, based on this that we discussed, there's no reason to interpret when we say one spoon weighing 10 gold shekels filled with incense, which is, we know it's a daimim, it's an inanimate object, and vegetation, it's alluding to Torah and the Asar Sadibus and the 630 mitzvahs. Now, so the Rebbe says this. Is there beer in them? The explanation is as follows. Rashi is done medayik. Rashi is medayik. He emphasizes as kaf achas is kineged ha-teira shenitna miyadei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Was das meint nicht teira bechlal nor di luchis. Was bei zei dafke gefindt men anasina miyadei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, Rashi is when he says that kaf achas, one spoon, corresponds to the teira which was given by the hand of Hashem. It's referring to not to the general teira, but dafka to the luchas, to the tablets, where we specifically see that they were given by the hand of Hashem. Similarly, the 10 gold shekels correspond to the 10 commandments, which were the Malay Ketedus filled with incense, Gematria Tayag mitzvahs, which they have the numerical value of 613 mitzvahs. Meint das nicht die Aser Sadibros and Tayag mitzvahs for sich. So this is not referring to the 10 commandments and the 630 mitzvahs by themselves, nor with their kaf, the luchas, and malay fun tayag. Tayag als atel fun the luchas was nitnei miyodei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This says the luchas anhalt aser sadibres aser zov was the aser sadibres and malay akteres gematria tayag mitzvahs v'irashia shem nefarish given and Parshas mishpatim as called tayag mitzvahs b'chlal aser sadibres. So just to explain again. The 10, when we say that the 10 Asar Zav is, the 10 gold shekels corresponds to the 10 commandments, and Malay Ketedus has the numerical value of 630 mitzvahs, so this is not referring to the 10 commandments and the 630 mitzvahs by themselves. Rather, like the spoon and the luchas were filled with 630 mitzvahs, and the 630 mitzvahs as they were contained in the luchas which were given by the hand of Hashem, meaning that the luchas contained 10 commandments, which was the 10 gold shekels, and these 10 commandments were filled with incense, the gematria tariyag mitzvahs. As Rashi says in Parshas Mishpatim that all 630 mitzvahs were included in the 10 commandments. Ibadas kav achas is menamas ev teira. The zi is nitna miyad shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, since this one spoon alludes to the Torah as it was given by the hand of Hashem, therefore, geht das nur rein in dem ersten Zug von Yoni Demim. Weil das, was Torah mitzvahs tun auf, es ist over nach Chefetz von Mitzvah, es ist wenn Ayid is mekabel Torah mitzvahs und tut a mitzvah bepeil. Now, this kaf achas alludes to the Torah as it was given by the hand of Hashem. It's alluded in the category of Daimim, since the function of Torah mitzvahs in transforming things into a Chefetz Shel Mitzvah is only doable when a Yid accepts Torah mitzvahs and actually fulfills the mitzvah. Tayag Torah mitzvahs, wie sie seinen mitzad atzmem, shashur shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nafilu wie der Eberster gibt sie nasna miyad shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, seinen sie nicht kevea, if später kein Kedusha in Welt. Now, the Torah mitzvahs, as they are intrinsically, which they are like shashur and Hashem's delight, and even as Hashem gives them, given by the hand of Hashem, do not embed during holiness into the world. Und wie der Ben Chomish hat schön gelernt, als die Yedidus an Shechina, if Har Sinai hat in dem Har nicht keveh gewinnt kein Kedusha später, like, and this Ben Chomish the Mikra, he learned that when Hashem descended in Har Sinai, it did not embed this lasting Kedusha, was their fire is noch dem, that's why after the presence departed, they were permitted to ascend the mountain. Nevertheless, was their far as an Agea Bar Mesumas is their kaf given funzav atayre kli with the friedige kli kesef und noch mehr, while das is a hechere darge in der achana zum in achai as durch termitzos soll machen von dem achai kanal. Now, nevertheless, because the giving of the Torah, the holiness was drawn down onto the mountain, like we said, whoever touches the mountain shall be put to death. So this kaf achas, this spoon was made of gold. The spoon was a precious utensil, which resembled the previously mentioned silver utensils and even more precious. Since this alludes to a higher level of the preparation to reach the category of chai, by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs, so the inanimate objects are elevated to the category of chai as mentioned above. Okay, Tess. Now, as he says this, Apia Omor, as Torah mitzvahs mitzal atmos nit nimmersen sugachai, vet veren verstandig Rashi's pirish of elim atudim kvasim. Based on the above, that the Torah mitzvahs are on their own, are not alluded to into the category of chai. We can clarify Rashi's comment on rams, goats, and lambs. Das was Rashi teich as the gimel minim zane kineged kainim levim yisraelim u kineged terim levim uksuvim. Now this, the Rashi says that these three things, they correspond to sai, kainim levim yisraelim, and terim levim uksuvim. Meint nit meisiv zayin noch hat zweiten dem is kineged terim levim uksuvim. We balas beide the Muslim stehen beferish echet kumt eis as zane fran sechs minim. Look, we asked before, how could three things allude to six things? Warum kanal? Like we said, a Torah itself is not alluded to in the sug of chai. Nor the gimel minim zane beker connected the drive of Rashi. Rechaz and days freer Yidin nor das is dafke wie Yidin seinen vereinzigt mit die gimel chelke atera zeis seinen da blaze drei Sachen. So these three species correspond primarily to the Yidin, to the three items that Rashi listed: Kainim, Levim, Yisraelim. Yidden, but specifically the way the Yidden are united with the three divisions of Torah, so there's really only three things. Okay, 90. Und das kommt der Hemmschach zum Friedrich in Pirish Rashi Eifel, Zev HaShlam, Bakar Shnaim, Keneged Meishe Waren, Shenitten Shalom ben Yisrael, Avim Shema Shamayim, from der Shalom, Mechibur zwischen Yidden, mit den Ebersten, haben Meishe Waren, aufgetan, Manter, durch, mit den Torah Mitzvahs. Now, this comes as a continuation to Rashi said before, that for the Shloimy, the two oxen correspond to Moshe and Aaron, who established peace between the Yidden and their father in heaven, meaning the peace and connection between Hashem and Hashem was brought about by Moshe and Aaron at the giving of the Torah through Torah mitzvahs. Is their fun gufay chocha as they zayin connected kenim levim Yisraelim nit nur mitzad ma'alasam malzidin b'chlal nar wie sie zayin miyuchim mit den Torah connected Tanach was durch them wird der shalom mechibur zwischen sie mit avim sheba shamayim. Now these three specific species, the rams, the goats, the lambs, which were also shlamim, this proves that they correspond to kenim levim Yisraelim, not just by virtue of the general standing of kenim levim Yisraelim as yidden, but as a reflection of their connection with Torah corresponding to the Tanakh. In turn, this brings about peace and connection between them and the Eberster. Okay, last ice. Apisa sich verstandig der Hemmschach von Pirish Rashi was gleich nach im Farsh sein connected to Nevi'im Ksuvim. Is a Mamshach in themselves Dibra Maskal Shalish Chamish is connected Chamish Chumshin. Now, on this, we can understand what Rashi says immediately after his interpretation corresponding to Nevi'im Ksuvim. Rashi continues under the same Dibra Maskal. The 3 fives correspond to 5 Chumashim. About the Indian state in ein Hemshech mit the connected Torah is moving as mit the Shalish Chamishes main min nit Adamas Eifa Nayer Bazunder in Yonan nor Hemshech Pirish to connected Torah. Now, since this point flows immediately after corresponding to the Torah, so this phrase 3 fives doesn't mean to be meramis as something new. Rather, this phrase is a continuation and an explanation to the corresponding of Torah. In order to emphasize here that the Torah speaks, so that we're speaking as the Yidden received by the Torah and become unified with them. Not as we said that Kafachas is referring to the Torah the way it was given from the hands of Hashem. Was so the Nisim, they brought these 3 species in multiples of 5 This highlights the division that exists in Torah and mitzvahs. V'Torah is nitna miyad shel Kadosh Baruch Hu is ganz Torah v'ein inyan. Bezas der Eibishter hat gesagt Allah says dibus b'divrei echad. Now Torah, the way it was given by the hand of Hashem, it's one entity to the extent that Hashem said all 10 commandments in one utterance. Rashi's matgit from pasuk oichtem word kaf achas. That's why Rashi adds the word achas. The cheder is a normal farishtem word kaf. He's only explaining what a spoon is. While the mit is a matgish as dort redt sich wie Teda is in anifem von achas. Teda wie sie wird gegeben geworden, gegeben von Eberstern nicht kukendik was is on halt the Sarsa Dibris and in Malay Keteris the young mitzvahs is the kaf achas ein inyans, because Rashi is hinting when we say one spoon, he is hinting to the idea as given from Hashem, the Torah in one entity, one spoon, despite the Torah containing 10 commandments, and being fulfilled with instance 630 mitzvahs. Dafke wenn und durch dem, was jeden seine Mekabel Torah mitzvahs, hört sich an die Ischalkos in Torah, als das jeder seine chamische Chumschen, jeder Chumisch mit einer anderen Teichen, anderen Yonim, und die Ischalkos von mitzvahs is as the Seres Adibris was called Tayag mitzvahs b'chlal, Seres Adibris hein, seien das zwei Sugim, Chamesh Adibris aksur maluach echad, Yonim von hein, und Chamesh aksur mal shein, und Yonim von lab. Schenken die Seres Adibris von Tayag mitzvahs, wie sie werden gegeben von Eberstern, werden sie nirmas von Kaf Achas, as Seresov, nicht zwei Mo Chamesh, weil mit Zad Eberster hört sich an, nicht on the Ischalkos Shabbahem, nor Allah Seres Adibris, and ein Mitzias Kaf Achas. So the Rebbe says that only when and because the Eden receive the Torah mitzvahs are the Ischalkos within the Torah apparent, that there are 5 Chumashim, each Chumash containing different content and subjects and divisions within the mitzvahs, and then you have the 10 commandments, the 630 mitzvahs, which are included in the 10 commandments. There are 2 categories. You have the 5 commandments of which are mitzvahs aseh, and 5 leis aseh. Now, in contrast, the 10 commandments and the 630 mitzvahs, as they were given from Hashem, are alluded to in the pasuk, 1 spoon weighing 10 gold shekels, not 2 times 5, because from Hashem's perspective, there's no division. Rather, all the commandments make up a single entity of 1 spoon.